Welcome to Business Mastery with Dawn Kennedy, your quick under 45-minute dose of expert insights and strategies to make a positive impact on your business and life. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. So, big question, what happens at the end of your business? Maybe you want to retire. Maybe you've got people to pass it down to, or you want to sell, but there are so many things that need to be thought through, second and third order effects of all of your decisions about what's going to happen to this amazing legacy that you've spent so many years building. So I have Melissa here today. She is going to walk us through a lot of things to think about and considerations, and maybe some questions that we didn't know to ask that can help guide our bigger decisions. So Melissa, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Can you tell everyone who you are and who you serve?
Yes. My name is Melissa Hoyer, and I'm a certified financial planner, fee-only fiduciary here in Boulder, Colorado, as well as a professional life coach. And I work with people who have inheritances. I've been doing this for 20 years, so that is what I do.
Amazing. So when we were first sitting down and talking about how is inheritance important to maybe business and business considerations, we started discussing the fact that there are going to be so many businesses that are either going to transfer or are going to be sold. And there's a lot of value in those businesses and those transfers. And there's inheritances that will likely come down from that. And depending on what's decided with the business, whether the kids want to walk into it and take it over or purchase it or whatever, I don't think we often think about how it impacts estate planning and the next generation. I think a lot of times we're like, that's my retirement plan. I'm going to sell my business. I'm going to go to Miami. But is that the whole story? So I'm really glad we're diving into this today. So when you're talking about inheritances, you are talking about what we're going to call like post-death inheritances, right? So they've inherited the business or the income or the trust or the money because there's no one else there to make any decisions any longer. Is that a fair statement?
That is usually the case. Sometimes a trust can pay out during the grantor's lifetime,
Right.
and maybe when they turn age 35 or 40 or something like that. But usually it's oftentimes in a post-death situation.
Right. Okay. So understanding that once that happens and this money is coming or the business is coming and there's nobody else there anymore to make decisions, and it is up to the person who has received the inheritance or received the business or whatever it is that's involved. How can we look at setting things up so that the decisions are made and it's beneficial for everyone, especially in the estate planning process?
hmm Great question. And the first thing that comes to my mind is preparation. Preparation, preparation,
Right.
preparation. It's not a single event. I made this decision in my estate planning, and this is what's going to happen. And then the person receives the inheritance in whatever way was set up, and end of story, and they run off and have a great life. Like it is for the inheritor, it's like a meteor hitting their world,
Right.
particularly if they haven't been prepared. So being prepared is the softest landing you can give someone.
Yeah. Okay. And so, I assume that all of this is being navigated often with very heavy emotions and grief and things like that as well, which is more of a reason we want to put some additional planning and preparation and steps in place because there's a lot also going on, particularly if there's something like businesses involved with employees and other people, and or the business was sold, or a partner assumed the majority of the business and there was a payout because a founder had passed away. So when all of those things happen, how do we, I guess, prepare for that softer landing? Understanding too, as we're having this discussion, that, there's sort of a real, I would say, I'm not going to call it an obligation, but I'm going to call it a responsibility that when you have these things, that you do prepare, and don't, pass away and test it and leave a mess for other people to kind of have to have to clean up. And a lot of times we make a will when we have our children. Maybe we update it every 7, 8 years. We may have some financial change. Maybe we don't know the difference between making an estate plan and making a will. Maybe you can help us talk through that conversation.
Mhm. Right. So, uh, it starts with the business owner realizing that whatever their estate plan or will or however they decide to pass down the assets is going to have an impact. So it's not just this is a smart estate planning, tax saving way to do it. So I'm going to do that and then we're done. But it's really something that requires time and attention. And it's a bit of a journey to figure out what you want to do with this beautiful thing that you created and what you would like the impact to be. So the first thing is just understanding that it has a huge impact and that it will take more time than a couple of visits to the attorney's office to figure it out.
Right. Right. So what can we build inside an estate plan that kind of help make this I guess a little bit more predictable for everyone involved?
Okay, so I'm not an attorney. What I like to do with clients,
Yeah, but staying on the financial side, right? So
yeah.
let's be honest. So attorneys are fantastic a lot of times at the transactional pieces of it, but they're not going to probably be following somebody who inherited this for 6 months and you're more on that side, right? So aside from the transactions, I want to get into what are the considerations? What are the decisions? If we understand that there's going to be a huge impact, how do we kind of dissect that into the things that we need to be very sensitive to as we're building this transactional thing that an attorney is going to file with the probate court?
Mhm. So what I do with clients from a coaching standpoint is help them figure out what they want. So for example, do they have a successor in the family who wants the business? And what happens if they have children who want the business and some children who want nothing to do with it? How do you equalize that? And what is it how if you want to pass something down, whether it's the business or wealth, what is the impact that you want to have with this? And so getting really clear about, gosh, I would love my family to grow together. I'd love for them to have a family property where they could come together and have experiences together. I would love for them to be involved with our family philanthropy. So that's a great way to educate the next generation about values, family values, and money, and how to make decisions about where to give your money to. And it's just a great way to learn those skills. Or, you know, what if you want your kids, you building wealth is such a different skill set than inheriting and stewarding wealth.
Right.
And a lot of wealth creators want the future generations to have that thrill of creating something versus passively being a recipient of a trust income.
Right.
And that has a different though they all have different impacts. So I think the thing is to get clear about what is it that in your heart you want for the next generation? And then we start to think, okay, well, this could be a charitable foundation, this could be something charitable, this could be an education trust or whatever. So we get clear about what it is that they want for the next generation. And then from the technical estate planning side, we say, okay, take this to the attorney and ask them how to make that legal or
Right.
get their input. And then from, like, the family culture standpoint, we say, "Okay, well, what kind of experiences and coaching and education and mentoring can you create for them so that they can thrive?"
Right. So what I'm hearing are some things like if half the family wants it, half the family doesn't. That needs to really be sorted through and very thoughtfully decided early on. So how early do we start making these considerations and making these plans? Because I would say that a financial planner might be managing and stewarding what you've built over time, but they're not likely looking at kind of the next steps. It feels very silent between financial planners and attorneys and estate planners. I think sometimes that it can be very, very siloed. So where do we start? Is this 10 years out, 20 years out? When do we have a like this trigger point where we actually need to start having this conversation? Is it a net worth that we've built? Is it because we've had 16 kids instead of 4, right? So what are from your experience, particularly, where are you seeing people maybe not preparing soon enough?
Mhm. I say the earlier the better, and I agree that there's usually some kind of point in time where you realize I'm either thinking about retiring or my children are grown up and they have an interest in this, and you just get more information at that stage of life, it seems like.
Okay.
And that's often when that would be a great time to start thinking about it. Of course, I could go big thinking and start in your parenting, whatever
Right.
you
But
want
we
to
are usually really
nurture.
different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
And
both.
exactly. So I think that's a really good time to start is when, your children have grown up, you're thinking about retiring at some point in time. And that's that gives you time to prepare, to educate, to communicate. The more communication, the better. I think some people try to withhold the wealth or the value because they don't want their children to be negatively impacted by wealth. And so that has an impact too. That has a different effect than if you're bringing them in, preparing them, giving them little bits to see how they do with it, help them learn, they can make mistakes, they can learn and grow. And then, so if you're starting 10 years earlier, you can witness that, which can inform your estate planning too.
Right. So, I mean, a lot of kids who grow up in family businesses that decide not to take them on, or they decide to do something else. Then there are people that grow up in the business and they decide to continue with it. It seems like you're saying there's a almost a natural transition once you start to get to almost the empty nest, right? So the last one either graduates and goes to college or goes to trade school or decides they want to do something else or they want to enter the business. And at that point, I think, especially when you have young, late teens, young 20s, we still believe that we have all the time kind of in the world to wait for them to make a decision, right, about what they wanna do. What are your thoughts on saying this can change in 5 years, but we need to make some decisions now, based on the information that we have in case something did happen, prior to our next sit down? What are your thoughts about approaching that kind of conversation? Because the other thing about some of these businesses, there's a lot of personalities involved. The founders, the next generation, market forces, those kinds of things. Or unfortunately, they've inherited a business because the founders are now gone. And what is, the benefit of having these discussions earlier as far as that transition place of we can discuss this maybe multiple times.
Mhm. Well, it's like creating a habit or a process for the family
Okay.
to say there's this thing that's not set in stone, but there's a thing. And let's talk about it. Let's hear how everybody feels about it. Here are some important things that we need to do right now. We need to make certain decisions in case something were to happen to me right now. And let's talk through, what would that look like? What do you think about it? And I think by having those conversations, it becomes dynamic and not static. It becomes collaborative. And so that's why I would start early from that perspective.
Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears and we're going to talk about what the impact is that you see when people just sort of blindly inherit something that they sort of knew was out in the cards, but they didn't really know how that was going to look like. And I want to talk very honestly about the lack of planning and what that can do when someone inherits a business or they inherit a large chunk of money because maybe a partner bought out the decedent's share if there was a founder kind of thing. Because I know that is really truly who you work with is the people on the other side of not planning and not necessarily considering the second and third order effects. So let's talk about that real quick.
Mhm. Right. So If someone hasn't been prepared, then it is shocking. It is a major life change. It's like experiencing, s- you know, a big transition. And there are, when we're in transition, it's chaotic, it's uncomfortable. We don't understand ourselves in that new circumstance. We just don't understand, you know, what we're supposed to be doing. It's intimidating, it's overwhelming. You don't know where to start. And there are stages of inherited wealth. So some people will be in denial, in which case nothing's being handled. Some people will be sort of like innocently living in this circumstance and they don't really understand it. And it's really disempowering. And for those people,
And it's not as they're controlled by other people's decisions sort of thing. It's like all of
exactly.
a sudden this just sort of landed in my lap and
Yes.
yeah,
And and then at some point in their lives, the inheritors' lives, something will happen in their life where they say, you know what? No more. I have to figure this out. Maybe it's the birth of a child. Maybe it's at the time of the inheritance. Who knows? But at some point in time, they'll say, I've got to figure this out. And that's when they enter the learning and growing phase.
right. Right. So how long do you see on average people needing as far as a runway if they're not prepared and not surprised? I'm sure you've seen a range of people sort of having these life-changing events that take time to figure out and recover. I mean, where are we looking here? I mean, it's kind of like how long could we actually have this net I would say a net negative impact on that daily life?
Oh, it could be anywhere from not long to years, depending on how long it takes for that individual to come out from that place of overwhelm and denial or, innocence or whatever. It could it just depends on the person.
Right. All right. So I'm going to switch and play devil's advocate here really quick. And I know there are going to be people listening. And I know there are going to be people who would say, well, how could you not know this was coming your way? How could you not know? You've lived in this house for, 21 years or 18 years or whatever it is, and you've seen us build this thing and you were part of it and you worked in the warehouse in the summer when you were in high school or how did how could you not know? How could they not have seen that coming? And so maybe there's a little bit because these are hard conversations and we don't like to sit with discomfort, right? So of course they knew this was going to be heading their way. Of course, I'm gonna, okay. So planning, I have a will. It's fine. I don't know why we needed to do this. So can we kind of address it? That would be a reasonable, realistic response that people could have. That it's like you're living in it. You're living with this every day. How did you not know? How could this kinda knock you aside? And I wanna be very sensitive in that, but, I think that if we were to have that resistance to this conversation or to not address sort of this idea that we're making assumptions, it may actually make things worse.
I don't know, the analogy that came to mind is like all kids see adults driving and they know one day they're gonna drive.
Yeah,
And then, when they turn 16, if you say, "Here's your new car. Here's the keys to the car. Have a great time."
right.
It's like, it's coming, but you just have no way to, um, relate to it. You don't know how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have this incredible gift, but you're actually not able to use it to get anywhere
Right.
or to go anywhere with a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's fair, but we have to be honest about kind of these reactions and things because it's human nature sometimes to sort of make assumptions that other people will be able to just easily pick up and do the things because you've been part of this or whatever. But what we're talking about here in a lot of cases is truly life changing amounts of money and life changing assets that maybe they're not prepared for, even in their 30s and 40s. So, again, where can we sort of understand besides the question of the impact? And there's transactional questions and things. But, what questions besides what do you want to do with it should we be asking the next generation to find out maybe their comfort level with some of this? I think a comfort level would maybe drive some of the decisions, whether we do a trust or whether we do something different. So yeah, how do we evaluate our own comfort level? And then how do we ask sensitively, without judgment, sort of like, hey, if tomorrow something happened and this, $20 million a year firm dumped in your lap, what would you do with it? Or how do you do that? How can we do that in a way that keeps the conversation open? Because I want to say that it would be human nature to go, oh, that's not going to happen. You're going to be here for 15 more years. Oh no, you have a
Mhm.
partner. No, there's 5 other kids that'll take the business, right? So how do we get out in front of that? Um, respectfully and allow some of that to kind of rise up. Nobody likes these topics, which is why I don't mind discussing them. Nobody really wants to think about that, but when you own a business, you've kind of built another child or another thing over years, or if you're inheriting it, you're passing it for a ninth time, there is that sense of responsibility and obligation to the founders, I think, that in family lineage doesn't go away.
Mhm. Good question. How do you actually do this? And for good reason, I witness founders and business owners be reluctant to discuss it because of what we touched on earlier is that they're concerned that like kind of the dark side of wealth, right? Like
Right.
their kids won't be motivated and this and that and the other thing. And I totally get that. And I think the key is to learn how to have those conversations in a way where your kids are empowered and they know that it's not a free ride and that they have to work and grow and learn. And that's an expectation in the family. So again, I think it comes back to the founder of like, what do I want the impact to be? And what actions do I need to take to support that?
Right.
And, like, the actual way in, it's such a good question, and what comes to mind, like, as a coach, everybody's talking about, "What's your life purpose?" And if I say to someone, "What's your life purpose as a coach?" They're like, "A deer in the headlights," because it's too big of a question.
Right.
But if I say something like, "What is something that you did that you just feel really proud of?" And if I start to ask questions in that way, eventually you start to get to see like, this is your gift in life. This is what you're all about. This is the contribution you're making without asking the question directly. So I think a good doorway in to all of this is like ask your 10-year-old, hey, what is it that you think I do all day?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And just starting to get curious about their, interpretation of what's going on and how they feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And typically, like you touched on this beautifully is we want to talk about all of the success we've had, but we don't actually want to talk about how we think that's going to spoil you and make you a person who is not appreciative or doesn't have gratitude. So we're not going to talk about it. We're going to show it, but we're actually not going to talk about it. And then when something happens, we sell or we pass away or something, then it'll just all come to you and you're smart. You'll figure it out. I think in light of this conversation, that is probably what happens, I would say almost a majority of the time and likely with the people that you work with.
I would agree, and I see it as such an amazing opportunity for the family to have a unique experience and to have connection in a really special way.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. When you do have founders in the family that have built something, whatever that thing is, there's not just like the legacy of the thing itself, but the stories that go with it. And do you remember? And we've done something um different, right, with what we're doing in the world. We didn't maybe, we started it when we were 22, maybe we started it when we were 42. Either way, it doesn't matter. We took a risk and did something that the majority of the population probably wouldn't do. And I would venture to say that most inherited wealth is actually inherited from founders of next generation, um, in the lineage. They're going to get the majority of that wealth.
There is that um, saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. So, oftentimes the second generation does inherit and it may be greatly reduced by the time it gets to the third generation or completely gone after the third generation.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. So really this conversation, especially if you are a founder and you are listening, if this has not been something you have considered about the impact of the legacy that you're leaving, we need to have that conversation. We need to start a little bit, not only earlier. I'm not just going to say earlier, but you made such a great like point. There's this moment in time with this transition with the kids being grown that it feels like it would just be a natural extension if you intended it that way.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Melissa, where can people find you, learn more about what you do? And if there are listeners who have children working in the business who have kind of triggered this, uh-oh, I probably should talk to someone, where can they reach out?
A great place to learn more is my website called wayintowealth.com. That's the coaching program I take people through to get clear about these things. It's called wayintowealth.com. And you can also find me on my website, my other website, which is the wealthconservancy.com. That is the financial planning firm where I work. And yeah, that's my contact information.
Amazing. So we'll put those down inside the show notes. And if you find us on the day this launches, or you find it 2 years later, you'll still be able to find Melissa. Thank you so much for being willing to come on here and kind of talk about this from inheritors or the inheritees perspective, I guess the inheritor perspective, but then also really where we should be looking, as business owners, that leading through business mastery also means leaving a succession plan that really does support and protect the next generation.
Mm. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I love talking about this. I love giving the inheritors perspective to founders and owners.
Yeah.
And I truly hope that everybody takes time to think about these things, which really can be quite fun
Yeah.
and exciting. And so I hope that everyone feels inspired to do that.
I appreciate it so much. All right. Thank you so much again. And I'll talk to y'all next time on the next episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to DawnKKennedy.com, and you can now check us out on YouTube, as well as, of course, any of your favorite platforms that host podcasts. Take care.